All right, let's say our La'asok B'divrei Torah blessing together. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Kitzanu Mitzvotav V'tzivanu La'asok B'divrei Torah. Praise to you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has made us holy with your commandments and commanded us to busy ourselves with the words of Torah.
Right.
All right, so our topic this evening, what's a mezuzah? That's a mezuzah, but that doesn't really tell you all that much. So, Alan, would you read what's a mezuzah on 1 foot, please?
A mezuzah is a box that has verses from the Torah in it. It goes on the doorways of a house and other Jewish spaces.
Okay. So between the picture and the description, hopefully we have some basic sense of what we're talking about. All right. Charles, would you read, what do you do with a mezuzah?
Yeah, did you say Carol or Charles?
I said Charles.
Oh, I thought you said, what do you do with it? People touch the mezuzah and then kiss their hand when they enter or leave a room.
Okay. Carol.
Question,
Yes, question.
right in this statement, what if you kiss your hand and then touch the mezuzah? Is that a violation?
No.
So either
That
way,
also works.
either direction. Yeah.
Yes. Other questions at this point, since we're stopped? All right, seeing none. Carol, would you read, where do you put a mezuzah?
Mezuzah goes on the doorway of every room in the house except for bathrooms. Closets and other rooms meant for storage also don't need a mezuzah. A sukkah wouldn't get a mezuzah either because it's not a permanent house. Mezuzahs are put on the right side of the doorway when you are entering a room. They should go on the top half of the doorway, some say the top third, but not all the way at the top so that people can still reach them. Some people put mezuzahs lower down on the doorway, so to a child's room.
Okay, thank you. Questions about this?
I've also seen mezuzahs put down lower so people in wheelchairs can reach them.
Good point. Thank you.
Same principle, yeah.
David, the location on the right side of the doorway is regardless of whether the door hinge is on the right or the left?
I believe so.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
If a mezuzah was put up on the left side, like on, say, on accident, is it still like, do you have to take it down and put it, like, flip it around, like, to the other side, or are you supposed to leave it?
So, what do you do?
Are you a left-handed person?
In this hypothetical, let's say you're not.
Okay. So my sense, and here I am speaking just from sense, not from being able to point to a specific text to prove this. My sense is that if it is not too much of a hassle to take it down and put it up again, then you should move it to the other side. If, on the other hand, it would cause major problems, then the Torah just says put it up on the doorways at all. So from a Torah perspective, you're doing fine. And you have a mezuzah up, you shouldn't feel guilty every time you walk through the doorway. If you're left-handed, you might be able to make the argument that you are putting it where you are touching with your dominant hand. The other thing on the matter is that it's supposed to be up walking into a room, but sometimes there are archways between rooms.
Oh.
So what's going into one room on the right side would be flipped coming from the other direction, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Oh,
On both sides.
So in a situation like that, you still only put up one mezuzah, ideally on the right side, as if you were heading from the front of the house to the back of the house. This is what the sources say. However, if it is between two spaces that could be considered rooms, then you are merely putting it on the right side, going the other direction.
Possibly along
I
a
see.
similar line, when you move out of a house and you don't know who is going to be moving in, do you remove the mezuzah and take it with you, or do you leave it?
I believe you are supposed to leave it, unless
Even if you don't know that a
David?
Jew will be moving in.
David, I think there's a differentiation. If Jews are moving in, you're supposed to leave it, but if they're not Jews, then you're supposed to take it.
that
But if
sounds
you don't
right.
know,
And if you don't know, then I think you probably leave it, but I will see if I can find anything about it. There's a comment. If there's a chance that the mezuzah will be defaced, you should take it. The other thing is that I believe you only need to leave a mezuzah on the front door. So for instance, if this is a personal collection of mezuzot and you have worked hard to acquire all of them and they all have personal meaning for you, for instance, we received one as a wedding gift from the Camper Mas staff, my 11th summer of working at Ramat Darom. So like that would be a mezuzah I wouldn't want to take with me, or that I would want to take with me. So you would need to leave a mezuzah on the front door if there are Jews coming in, but I believe you can take all the other ones. And as Ariella pointed out, if there is a cleaning crew or remodeling that is going to happen in your apartment, and if you're renting and the mezuzah is likely to be taken down, you should take it. You should take it down and take it with you.
thank
The
you.
thought occurs to me that if you know people are Jewish who are going to be coming in, you might have, or I might have some limited comfort of asking them outright, would you like me to leave them as mezuzah, or would you like to put up your own?
Right.
And rather than toss mine, I'll take mine if that's okay with you, but tell me how you feel. And you get an expression. If they're not Jewish, it might be even a little touchier, and you might have to take a guess when you get into the gray area, like Herb was mentioning, or one of my other classmates was mentioning.
Yes. Yes, some people find particular meaning in putting up a mezuzah, that it's, and we'll see this somewhat as we get further down the source sheet, but putting up a mezuzah can be the final step of saying, okay, we've moved everything in, and now this apartment or this house is becoming a home. And so, particularly for a Jewish family, they might want to be able to put up their own mezuzah as a way of having that, okay, we are here, we've moved in, now we're home. Particularly if they brought their own mezuzah from their own front door. But that would be a matter that you would want to communicate with them if you know that they're going to be Jewish moving in.
I see. Thank you also, David, for your explanation earlier.
All right, other questions about where you put a mezuzah? Okay. Moving right along.
Oh, David, I do have a
Zoya,
comment.
would you read what's inside a mezuzah, please? Let's see. Are you here? You're muted.
Sorry, I'm on my phone, so it's harder. What's inside a mezuzah? The mezuzah contains a scroll of parchment. On it is handwritten in Hebrew the words of Deuteronomy, the Shema v'Ahavta, and in Deuteronomy 11:13-21, the V'Hayeh Imo Shemo. These are the texts in the Bible that talks about mezuzah. A scribe called a sofer or soferat, male and female respectively, has to write the text for it to be considered kosher. What's on the outside of a mezuzah?
Great, thank you. All right, so we have a sofer with us this evening, someone who's been part of our group in the past, and we're glad to have her back. So Ariella, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Thanks, David, and thanks for having me here. I want to talk a little bit about what goes into writing a mezuzah, because there are a lot of misconceptions about why writing a mezuzah is so difficult. So in fact, I have a Sefer Torah in process behind me, but writing a mezuzah is actually much harder. Writing a Torah takes longer, but writing a mezuzah is much harder. And people always say, oh, it's because it's so small. And it's like, well, yeah, but actually the thing that's really hard about writing a mezuzah is that it has to be written, the term is kesidran, which means that it has to be written in order. Every letter has to follow the preceding letter. And it has to be followed by the next letter. And if you make a mistake, you can't go backwards. And if you make a mistake writing a Torah, as long as it's not the name of God, not a big deal. You just, scratch it off, recondition the parchment, and then rewrite it and keep going. But when you're writing a mezuzah, unless you catch your mistake immediately, that's it. There's no going back. You have to just put it in the geniza and start over. So this here actually is the prettiest mezuzah that I ever wrote. And it is completely pasul. Why? Because I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but I'm going to try to hold it up to the camera. But if you look right there, in the first line of the second paragraph, there's a shin that is missing its central arm. Oh, thanks for so right here. So it's a minor mistake, and this is completely pasul. It's not kosher. I can't go back and correct it. And the thing is, after the fact, nobody can tell whether or not I went back and corrected it. They can't tell whether or not I wrote it in order. And that's one of the reasons why it's, here I'm going to get on a bit of a soapbox and say, it's real. If you're buying a cheap mezuzah, chances are it's not kosher. If it's kosher, it's by accident, because you have to pay somebody. First off, you should be paying them a living wage. Never mind the fact that they're doing, both incredibly skilled labor and sacred labor. But also you have to incentivize good behavior, which is to say that you have to make it worth somebody's while to know, even if I spent all of this time writing this mezuzah and I found out at the very end that it's not kosher, that I have to have the ethics to, put it in the Geniza and start over again and not try to sell it after the fact. And if you're being paid, pennies a piece, then, you can't afford to, to waste that time on something that's going to wind up in the Geniza. So, good mezuzot are expensive, but they're worth it.
How do you know if it's kosher?
So you can tell. So first off, you can tell by looking at it that all of the letters are formed correctly. All of the words are correct. Everything is there in the correct order. If the letters are not formed correctly, which is the most usual problem, then it's not going to be kosher. And many of the cheaper mezuzot are in fact, visibly unkosher and very sloppy.
So how does a super
Can it be
layman know?
When you talk about cheap mezuzot, are you talking about the parchment or the case?
I'm talking about the parchment.
Okay, thank you.
I don't
Ariel,
have any comments on the case.
Okay.
can it be written in script, or does it have to be written in print?
All of them are going to be written in print, which is not really a I'm gonna leave that technical rant aside. But the fact of them, but there are many different scribal hands that you can find them in. So I write in the Spanish Portuguese hand, and that looks significantly different than the Har Zion script that you're going to be seeing in most of the Sefer Torah that you're probably familiar with.
Thank you.
How much
How long
would
Sorry. How long does it usually take you to write a mezuzah?
So start if you don't count any pauses, it usually takes between an hour and an hour and a half. But the pauses can be lengthy, because if you do make them, first off, like, I'm checking as I'm going along, because as I mentioned, if I, don't catch an error, then, that's it, it's kaput. So if I do catch an error, what you do is you put it aside, you wait for it to dry, you fix it, and then you keep going. So those pauses can be lengthy. So, it's an hour, but it's an hour to maybe an hour and a half, but it's not a continuous hour always. Sometimes it is, if you're pitching a really good game, then it can be continuous. Tybal?
So the way you just said that made me wonder, because particularly now since the pandemic, you can meet with people virtually. Like, I just looked at your website, like you could meet with Jen, who I assume is still in Riverdale, may not be, but do scribes look at, is there a process where you as a scribe will look at someone else's work to say, oh yes, it's fine, and then they look at yours, so it's like a reciprocal checking?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, you are required to have your work checked before you can, send it off. So I'm having this Torah checked twice, once by computer and once by a person. And yeah, I have my mezuzot checked before I send them to clients. And yes, I do all of that virtually. Nobody's coming to each other, or very few people are coming to each other's house and checking in person.
Ariella, can you talk about having it checked by computer?
No, because that's a very long talk.
Okay. I mean, there's a special program that scans and reads and says,
it's special. I can say that it's specialized software. It's similar to OCR, but it's it's specialized. And it is nowhere near infallible. It is very fallible.
Thank you.
Several years ago, when Spertus was in their old building, they had a museum. And I remember them having a so-called art exhibit, if you will. And there was a piece of wood, which was a doorpost, and the script of the mezuzah, if you will, the text, was actually carved into the wood. Would that be kosher?
That was the original method. This is a lot easier. However, so if you want to get technical, that doesn't count as writing according to halakha, but since that's the original method, we can't really say, well, that doesn't count. It's not really done and the light anymore for a whole variety of reasons, not the least of which being that the chance of having God's name damaged or defaced is much higher when it's exposed to the elements like that. But yeah, that was the original way of doing it.
Is it
It'd be
scribed
kosher
on
when
the-
you put it up, but then next week it might not be. Thank you.
How
Is
long
the-
have you been the scribe?
Since 2015. So closing on 10 years
9
now.
Yeah.
I have a question related to the carved mezuzot, if you happen to know anything about this. I heard that Samaritans still carve them. So if you know, are those like considered like, are those considered mezuzot, or would those be? I'm curious. If you know.
I can't address that. I'm not an halakhic authority. I'm a scholar, not a posek.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I'm
Getting
curious
to the
about
ca-
one thing. Does anybody ever give you a hard time because you're female?
Absolutely. But well, or rather, I should say that nobody who's commissioning me is going to give me a hard time about it.
But others might.
People do give female scribes a hard time. Yes, they absolutely
I kind of thought so, yeah.
So it's getting to the case is, do all mezuzahs have to have a shin on the case?
That's an excellent segue. David, back to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Ariella.
Thank you, Ariella.
Thank
Nice
you,
to see
Ariella.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
thank
thank you. God bless.
All right. So pulling up the source sheet again. All right. Okay, come on. All right, Marilyn, would you read our what's on the outside of a mezuzah?
Sorry, it took me a while to unmute. What's on the outside of the mezuzah? The only requirement is that there is a Hebrew letter shin, which because the divine name Shakai mispronounced on purpose. Some say that the name that the name of God can be seen as an acronym for Shomer Dalet Yisrael, guardian of the doors of the Jewish people. Other than that, the case of a mezuzah can be made of any material that protects the scroll and can be attached to a doorway. There is also no color requirement for a mezuzah.
All right. Thank you. Questions about the outside of a mezuzah?
I have a comment. When I bought the mezuzah for Hadassah's office when I worked there,
Mhm.
some of the cases are clear, and Rabbi Wolf told me that was fine, unless the door is like across from a bathroom. So,
Yes.
yeah, so in my last apartment, the bedroom was across from the bathroom, so I had a wooden cover.
Yeah.
David,
Yes.
does the word protect imply not only protection of the scroll from physical harm to the scroll, does it also imply the preservation of the letters as long as one can preserve? Am I asking the question right? There's two different issues I'm asking about.
Are you
Letters
asking?
letters can decay, and the parchment can still be in good shape, but the letters can decay or chip or whatever. I don't know. So I'm asking protection, protect the scroll. Does that include both concepts of the
Yes,
the
that
preservation of the
includes
letters and the
that
and the
includes both
parchment?
the parchment and the letters.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Stacy, would you read Why Do We Put Up the Mezuzah?
Yes. Why do we put up a mezuzah? The Bible says, write these words on the doorposts of your home and on your gates. The biblical word for doorposts is mezuzot, singular mezuzah. Over time, the word mezuzah went from the doorpost to the thing that goes on the doorpost. The word gates may have originally meant city gates, as those were a place where court cases were heard.
Okay. Thank you. Questions about this?
If you had a fence around your house, would you put up a mezuzah on the gate and the fence?
I don't believe so. So this is talking about a community where it is assumed that everybody is Jewish, or at least you have Jewish sovereignty over the community. If that makes sense.
Seems with due respect that city gates implies that there's walls or something, but it seems like the reference to gates in our liturgy and in our scriptures seems to refer to where the elders, Sanhedrin, if you will, of their times would gather. Like, and we just read the book of Ruth, where Boaz and the other 9 guys who made up the minyan to talk about the issues at hand. That's where those guys gathered at the city gates. And so, as I recollect, you can please correct me if I'm wrong, but that seems to me historically to be why the city gates would be likely.
Yes.
And I'm good with that, as opposed to the gate in front of one's lawn or something like that. I think you're right. I'm good with you.
Yes, and the word and the entrances to the old city of Jerusalem are referred to also as the Sha'ar, like Sha'ar Yafa, the Jaffa Gate. So even today we see that word, that biblical word, being used to apply to city gates.
May I say, why do we put up a mezuzah? And the only reason you give in this section, maybe it's elsewhere too, I don't know, is the Bible says it. So and the premise is, I guess, unspoken. It says it right in the Torah, so you should do it. And my question is, since there are rabbis who will tell you, and there's a tradition of I won't go into the particulars, but there's a tradition people may know about certain rabbis treating the mezuzah as a kind of as strictly as an amulet, or there's a fancy word, a patropaic device for warding off evil. And if you're having some trouble, they'll say, check your mezuzah, and sure enough, you'll find a defective cloth or whatever the parchment is. Or you might find it's printed on paper, something unacceptable, then you take that down so that your house can be restored to order. So just, that was my question, is whether other reasons that people put up mezuzahs are something you want to talk about or not, and or if those are things you want to dispense with in some way.
Yeah. So what I'll say at this point is that why we put up a mezuzah, I guess the question is imprecisely worded. The answer that I gave is the answer to the question of why did Jewish tradition incorporate the idea of mezuzah into its rules? Generally, the halachic system, the legal system, starts with the Torah. And so if something's in the Torah, then it gets explicated in further texts like the Mishnah and the Talmud, and goes on from there, and it gets implemented as if possible. So from a legal approach, mezuzah, we put up a mezuzah because it says so in the Torah. From a what?
I was going to say, but doesn't the Torah also say that every man should write a Torah? And these days, not every man does.
That's true. But just because some things aren't, I don't know if it says every man should write a Torah. I'll have to go back and check if it's every king or every person. Either way.
For sure. Every king for sure.
Either way, just because some things are not practical from what is in the Torah does not mean that other things do not apply. There may be something about that in legal writing today about like severability of clauses in contracts or something like that. So the Torah says, do this. There are those Jews who would say, that's nice that the Torah says that. But they still put up a mezuzah because that is what Jewish people do. Or that is what their family did, or what they did, what they had growing up. So there are a variety of reasons why individual Jews put up a mezuzah. Thank you, Joe, for that comment about being able to participate in writing a Torah through helping a sofer with a single letter. There are a variety of answers as to why individual Jews put up a mezuzah, and this is the answer to why putting up a mezuzah is originally a Jewish thing to do. Does that clarify, Phil?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Since you're unmuted, could you read the next section, please?
Oh, how do we put up a mezuzah? A mezuzah goes on the doorpost, specifically on the right side when you walk into a room. You can put it up with a hammer and nail, or if you are concerned about leaving marks, with a 3M poster strip. Usually the mezuzah goes on the top third of the doorpost at a height so that an adult can reach up comfortably and kiss it. If it is for a child's room, the mezuzah could be placed at a height that is comfortable for a child to reach, though it should be affixed in a way that is easy to change as the child grows. Because there was a dispute about whether the mezuzah should be vertical or horizontal, it is diagonal, with the top leaning toward the inside of the room. The dispute was in Ashkenazi sources. Sephardi sources don't have any such dispute, so for Sephardi Jews, the mezuzah is vertical. There is a blessing said for putting up a mezuzah.
Hey, can read that in. Go ahead and read the blessing, please.
Okay. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kiddeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu likboa mezuzah. Praise are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has made us holy with your commandments and commanded us to affix the mezuzah.
All right, thank you. All right, questions about how to put up a mezuzah?
David?
Yes.
I have a comment that relates to the previous question. I think about it a lot. I know several people, including people in my apartment building, decide not to put up a mezuzah because it identifies them as being Jewish. And with so much anti-Semitism going on, they feared that they would not be safe if they had mezuzah on their door. So they did not put up for that reason. And they asked me, was I going, when I was moving in, was I going to put up a mezuzah? I said, yes. She said, aren't you afraid? I said, no. But they explained why they're not. Is there any validity to what their fear is? And I know that anti-Semitism is rampant and in Oak Park.
Yeah. So you're asking, is there a way to like address their concerns?
Yeah.
I think. All right. So the situation, as I understand it, that you're saying is there are people who are afraid of putting up a mezuzah because of anti-Semitism.
Yes.
And so I think if I were dealing with that sort of situation, first of all, I would not necessarily agree with him, but I would say, like, I understand your concern. There's definitely a lot of anti-Semitism going on. That being said, on the one hand, there's the idea of pikuach nefesh, that you can break any rule in Judaism to save a life except for 3. Not murdering someone, not doing rape or incest, and not committing idolatry. Putting up a mezuzah is not one of those big 3, so you can totally not put up a mezuzah in order to save your life. On the other hand, now that we've been in this period for quite a while, unless there is evidence that people with mezuzahs on their doors have been specifically targeted, then I don't know that that's a reason not to put up a mezuzah. And if they were concerned, they might put up a mezuzah inside their door, so that's not visible from the outside, but they still have it up.
I had a situation a number of years ago, an apartment I lived in. Somebody stole my mezuzah. So the rabbi told me to put one on just inside the door.
Yes. All right. Recognizing, yes,
David?
go ahead.
I was about to say, I think though, different personalities, they're also the point is, given that haters aren't always rational. So you can't say, oh, I'll be safe if I don't do this versus I do this. So some of it, particularly as things get more difficult, just going to say, and I did grow up in a community surrounded by anti-Semitism, even if it's difficult, if you find the resilience to do one thing that feels smaller in terms of standing up to bullying or hatred or whatever, then it may make it easier when it matters more to do the next one.
Yep.
I mean, just because
That's
at a
true.
certain point, that's why people, sometimes even survivors or I shouldn't say sometimes even, human beings react differently. Some survivors, when they got to the United States, walked totally away from Judaism. I just listened to genealogy talk, a granddaughter who discovered in her 30s, her mother was born Jewish, her grandfather was Jewish on all sides and had no clue. Human beings have different reactions. So I just think if you're someone who at a certain point isn't going to go to no longer being Jewish or hiding it, then the practice in standing up to bullying might be helpful as time goes on.
Yes. All right. Speaking of time, recognizing the hour, I'm going to quickly show you what's in the rest of this. and then you can look at it when I send it out. All right, other influences explaining the mezuzah might be connected to putting blood on the doorpost to protect from the angel of death when we left Egypt. There's also equivalent sorts of things in Mesopotamia about protecting spaces of transition. Are there songs about mezuzahs? Why, yes. Thank you for asking. There are two. One by Eliana Light, one by Sam Gleiser. Are there stories about mezuzahs? Oh, yes, there are. There's one about called a mezuzah on the door, which gets at the point of making the house feel like a home. There's one called the Shema and the Mezuzah about the idea of listening to each other, because the first word on the text in the parchment is Shema, listen. So it gets at the diagonalness of the mezuzah. There's also a Shalom Sesame episode about making a mezuzah. This is like, it's not Sesame Street, which is American, and it's not Shalom Tsum Tsum, which is Israeli. It's like Jewish Sesame Street, mostly set in Israel. So there's an episode about that. All right, then we have some appendices. So Appendix A is by Rabbi Dror Chenkin Gould. He gave me permission to use it. It is also found in the JUF News, or the Jewish Chicago magazine, and it gets at the question about, should we take down mezuzahs this year during a time of anti-Semitism? So there's that. And his answer, by the way, is no, we should not. Now is the time for the opposite. All right, we have something I wrote about mezuzahs and dinosaurs. And then there's a book called The Observant Life, which talks about living life Jewishly. And here's a text from that. A question: can a non-Jew put up a mezuzah? Thinking about putting up a mezuzah in solidarity with Jewish community members facing anti-Semitism. And the answer is yes, that's by Rabbi Lopatin. And finally, a mezuzah joke. So, and then the important text about mezuzah, starting with the Shema and the V'hayam Shmo, which is the second paragraph, both from the Torah. You got some Talmud, including about a mezuzah that saves someone who converted to Judaism. You've got more Talmud. You've got some Mishnah Torah from Maimonides, and you've got some Shulchan Aruch. And then an excerpt about a Kar mezuzah, and some other thoughts about mezuzahs. So, I'll stop the share and the recording.